The construction site on Kepler 442b buzzed with activity as dozens of alien workers moved massive steel beams and concrete slabs. The project was ambitious even by galactic standards. An orbital defense platform that would protect the entire system from pirate raids. Representatives from 12 different species worked together, each bringing their own expertise and technology. Marcus Chen wiped sweat from his brow as he surveyed the progress. As the human foreman, he was responsible for coordinating the diverse workforce, ensuring safety protocols, and keeping the project on schedule. The irony wasn't lost on him that humans were considered one of the weaker species in the galaxy. Yet here he was managing beings who could lift 10 times his weight. The Coraxians towered over everyone else, their chitinous exoskeletons gleaming in the twin suns. They handled the heaviest lifting with ease, their forearms working in perfect coordination. The insectoid Zephyrians buzzed around the upper levels, their natural flight ability making them perfect for high-altitude work. Even the aquatic nautiloids, working in specialized environmental suits, could manipulate materials with their powerful tentacles in ways that amazed Marcus daily. But it was Zarathek who commanded the most respect among the workers. The female draconian stood nearly 8 feet tall, her scaled hide a deep emerald that caught the light like polished armor. Her species was known throughout the galaxy for their incredible strength and fierce pride. Draconians had conquered dozens of worlds before joining the Galactic Federation, and they never let anyone forget their warrior heritage. Zarathek supervised the Coraxian heavy lifters, her voice booming across the construction site as she directed the placement of the main support columns. Her golden eyes held a mixture of authority and barely contained contempt, especially when they fell upon Marcus. "Human," she called out, her voice carrying the distinctive harmonic undertones of her species. "Your structural calculations show weakness in Sector 7. My warriors grow tired of compensating for inferior human engineering." Marcus checked his tablet, reviewing the stress analysis for the 1,000th time. The calculations were correct. He'd double and triple checked them himself. But questioning a Draconian's assessment was like questioning their honor, something that could lead to serious diplomatic complications. "The calculations account for the seismic activity on this world," Marcus replied evenly. "The flexibility built into the design will actually make the structure more durable in the long run." Zarathek's laugh was like the rumble of distant thunder. Several nearby workers stopped to watch the exchange, sensing the growing tension. "Flexibility," she repeated, making the word sound like an insult. "Your species confuses weakness with wisdom. On Draconis Prime, our structures stand for millennia because we build with strength, not compromises. Different approaches for different environments," Marcus said diplomatically. He'd learned early in his career that direct confrontation with warrior species rarely ended well for humans. "Your homeworld's geology is more stable than this one." "Excuses," Zarathek snorted, turning her massive head to address the gathering crowd of workers. "This is why humans will never be more than administrators and clerks in the galaxy. They think with their minds instead of their muscles. They calculate instead of conquering." A ripple of nervous laughter went through some of the workers. Others shifted uncomfortably, sensing that this was escalating beyond a simple professional disagreement. Marcus felt the familiar burn of frustration in his chest, but he kept his expression neutral. He'd heard variations of this speech countless times throughout his career. The Draconians weren't unique in their assessment of humanity. Most of the galaxy viewed humans as useful for logistics, diplomacy, and technical support, but ultimately weak. Humans couldn't fly like the Zephyrians, didn't have the raw strength of the Coraxians, and lacked the natural weapons of species like the Draconians. What humans did have, adaptability, creativity, and stubbornness, weren't qualities that impressed most alien cultures. "Perhaps," Marcus said quietly, "but sometimes the smallest force applied in the right place can move mountains." Zarathek's eyes narrowed. "Pretty words, human. But words don't build orbital platforms or defend systems from raiders. Strength does. Power does." She gestured with one massive clawed hand toward the worksite. "Look around you. Every heavy beam, every critical support, every dangerous task. It's handled by real warriors, real strength. Your kind points and directs, while others do the actual work. The accusation stung because it contained a grain of truth. Marcus was good at his job precisely because he understood the capabilities of each species and could coordinate their efforts effectively. But in a galaxy that valued physical prowess above all else, management skills were often seen as a consolation prize for those who couldn't contribute in more meaningful ways. A commotion near the equipment yard interrupted the tense conversation. Shouts and alarmed calls echoed across the construction site as workers began running toward a large cargo container. Marcus grabbed his radio and sprinted toward the disturbance. Zarathek's heavy footsteps thundering behind him. They found a crowd gathered around one of the massive shipping containers that had arrived that morning. The container was rocking slightly, and deep gouges were visible in its reinforced walls. Something was inside, and it was clearly not happy about being trapped. "What's in there?" Marcus demanded, as he pushed through the crowd. Thyro, one of the Coraxian supervisors, clicked his mandibles nervously. "Unknown predator, sir." Container manifest listed it as geological samples, but something's definitely alive in there. The container shuddered again, and a sound like grinding metal echoed from within. Whatever was inside was strong enough to damage military-grade shipping materials. Marcus felt a chill run down his spine as he realized the implications. "Could be a Nexus Drake," whispered Veltar, a blue-skinned Aquarian engineer. "I've heard stories of smugglers using them for illegal fighting rings." Zarathek stepped forward, her warrior instincts clearly engaged. "Nexus Drakes are among the most dangerous predators in known space," she announced to the crowd. "They can crush steel in their jaws, and their hide can deflect most energy weapons. If one is trapped in there," she didn't need to finish the thought. "A loose Nexus Drake on a construction site would be a disaster. The creature could kill dozens of workers before it could be contained, assuming they could contain it at all. We need to evacuate the area and call for military assistance," Marcus said, already calculating response times and evacuation procedures. "By the time help arrives, that creature will have broken free," Zarathek replied. "Listen to how it's testing the container walls. It's learning, finding weak points. We have maybe 30 minutes before it escapes." Marcus studied the container, noting the pattern of impacts and the way the metal was beginning to fatigue. Zarathek was right. Whatever was inside was systematically working its way toward freedom, but calling for evacuation would shut down the construction project for weeks, potentially months. The delays would cost millions of credits and set back the planetary defense schedule significantly. "There has to be another option," Marcus muttered, more to himself than to anyone else. "The only option is strength," Zarathek declared. "Someone needs to open that container in a controlled manner and subdue the creature before it breaks free on its own." She looked around at the assembled workers, her gaze lingering on the largest and most powerful among them. "It will take someone with real physical capability, someone who can match a Nexus Drake's power." The implications were clear. This was exactly the kind of situation where human limitations became painfully obvious. Marcus could coordinate an evacuation, could call for help, could run calculations and logistics. But when it came to facing down one of the galaxy's apex predators, humans simply weren't equipped for the task. "I could attempt it," Zarathek continued, her voice taking on the formal tone Draconians used when accepting a challenge. "Though even for my kind, a Nexus Drake represents significant danger. It would be an honorable death, should I fail." Several of the other workers stepped back involuntarily. The idea of watching a Draconian warrior face off against a Nexus Drake was terrifying and awe-inspiring in equal measure. It was the kind of confrontation that would become legend among the construction crews. Marcus stared at the container, his mind racing through possibilities. There had to be another way. There was always another way. You just had to be willing to think beyond conventional solutions. Humans might not be the strongest or the fastest, but they excelled at finding unexpected answers to impossible problems. The container shuddered again, harder this time. Cracks were beginning to appear in the reinforced walls. Whatever window of opportunity they had was closing rapidly. "Stand back," Marcus said quietly, stepping toward the container. Zarathek's laugh was sharp and incredulous. "Human," This is not the time for false heroics. A Nexus Drake would tear you apart before you could even scream. Leave this to those with actual capability. But Marcus wasn't listening to her anymore. He was studying the container, the impact patterns, the stress fractures in the metal. His engineering background was telling him things that raw strength couldn't reveal. There was more than one way to solve this problem. You just had to be willing to think like a human instead of a warrior. The crowd watched in stunned silence as Marcus Chen, ordinary human foreman, walked calmly toward a container holding one of the galaxy's most feared predators. Behind him, Zarathek's contemptuous laughter died away, replaced by something that might have been the first stirrings of curiosity. What happened next would change everything the galaxy thought it knew about human capability. Marcus approached the container with steady, measured steps. Behind him, he could hear Zarathek's voice rising in what sounded like a mixture of disbelief and anger. But he blocked it out. Years of working on construction sites had taught him to focus completely when lives were at stake. The container was standard galactic shipping grade, reinforced titanium steel composite, designed to survive atmospheric re-entry and withstand the stresses of faster-than-light travel. But the creature inside had found the weak points with disturbing intelligence. The impacts weren't random. They followed a pattern that suggested the Nexus Drake understood structural engineering better than most sentient species. Marcus pulled out his tablet and quickly accessed the container's manifest data. The shipping codes told him everything he needed to know about the container's construction, including details that weren't immediately visible. Most importantly, he could see the internal layout and the locations of the emergency release mechanisms. Human. Zarathek's voice boomed behind him. Step away from that container immediately. Your death will accomplish nothing except to feed that creature's hunger. Marcus glanced back at the assembled crowd. Fear was evident in every face. Regardless of species, even the mighty Coraxians, with their natural armor and incredible strength, had backed away to what they considered a safe distance. The Zephyrians had taken to the air, their wings carrying them far above the danger zone. The emergency releases are electromagnetic locks, Marcus called out, loud enough for everyone to hear. They're designed to fail safe in case of power loss or system damage. If I can overload the magnetic field generators, the locks will disengage and the container will open in a controlled sequence. Zarathek snorted. And then what? Human? The creature will still be free, still be dangerous. Opening the container solves nothing. Marcus smiled grimly as he accessed the construction site's power grid through his tablet. Opening the container is just step 1. Step 2 requires thinking like an engineer instead of a warrior. The Nexus Drake's impacts were growing stronger and more frequent. Hairline cracks spider-webbed across the container's surface, and the metal groaned under the assault. Marcus estimated they had less than 15 minutes before the creature broke free on its own. He began rerouting power from the construction site's main generators, channeling massive amounts of electrical energy toward the container's magnetic locks. The tablet screen showed power levels climbing toward dangerous territories, but Marcus knew exactly how much the system could handle before catastrophic failure. You're going to electrocute yourself, warned Veltar, the Aquarian engineer. Those power levels are beyond safe parameters for any known species. Beyond safe parameters for direct contact, Marcus agreed. But I'm not planning direct contact. Zarathek stepped closer. Her golden eyes fixed on Marcus, with an intensity that made several nearby workers uncomfortable. Explain your plan. Human. If you're going to die foolishly, at least let us understand your reasoning. Marcus continued working on his tablet, his fingers flying over the interface as he made final adjustments to the power grid. Nexus Drakes are apex predators, right? They've evolved to hunt the largest and most dangerous prey in their native environments. Their hunting strategy relies on overwhelming physical superiority. Obviously, Zarathek replied, impatience creeping into her voice. Which is why only the strongest warriors can face them in combat. Obviously. But what happens when you remove the element of combat entirely? Marcus asked. What happens when you change the fundamental nature of the encounter? Before Zarathek could respond, Marcus activated the power surge. Electrical energy flooded through the container's magnetic lock systems, causing them to overload in a spectacular cascade of sparks and smoke. The emergency releases triggered in sequence, and the container began opening along its designed failure points. The crowd tensed as the massive doors swung open, revealing the dark interior of the shipping container. For a moment, nothing happened. Then a sound emerged from within. A low, rumbling growl that seemed to vibrate through the ground itself. The Nexus Drake that stepped into the twin sunlight was everything the stories claimed and more. Nearly 12 feet long and covered in scales that shifted color like liquid metal. The creature was built like a living tank. Its massive head swiveled back and forth, taking in its new surroundings with intelligent yellow eyes. Razor-sharp claws left gouges in the metal shipping platform as it moved. Several workers screamed and fled. Even the bravest among them felt their courage falter in the face of such raw, predatory power. The Drake's presence seemed to fill the entire construction site, making every other living thing feel small and vulnerable. But Marcus stood his ground, tablet still in hand. Completely calm, despite being less than 30 feet from one of the galaxy's most feared predators, the Drake's eyes fixed on him, and for a long moment, predator and human regarded each other in perfect silence. "It's magnificent," Marcus said softly, loud enough for the crowd to hear. "Look at the muscle structure, the way it balances despite its size. This is millions of years of evolution perfected into a perfect hunting machine." Zarathek hissed in frustration. "Human, your admiration is meaningless if you're about to become its meal. What is your plan?" The Drake took a step forward, its massive head lowering as it assessed Marcus as potential prey. Every instinct the creature possessed told it that this small, soft creature should be easy prey. But something in Marcus's posture, his complete lack of fear, seemed to confuse the predator. Marcus raised his tablet and activated the construction site's heavy-lifting electromagnets. These were the same systems used to move multi-ton steel beams and concrete sections, capable of generating magnetic fields powerful enough to lift entire building components. The Drake had metallic content in its scales, a evolutionary adaptation that helped conduct bioelectricity through its nervous system. The effect was immediate and dramatic. The Nexus Drake suddenly found itself being lifted into the air, its massive body rising slowly but inexorably off the ground. The creature thrashed and roared, its claws scoring the air as it tried to find purchase. But the magnetic field held it suspended 3 feet above the shipping platform. The construction site fell absolutely silent, except for the Drake's frustrated roars. Every worker, regardless of species, stared in disbelief at the sight before them. The galaxy's most feared predator hung helplessly in midair, completely at the mercy of a human's ingenuity. "Impossible," Zarathek breathed, her voice barely above a whisper. Marcus kept his eyes on his tablet, carefully adjusting the magnetic field strength to ensure the Drake remained secure without causing injury. Nexus Drakes are adapted for ground-based hunting. Their entire evolutionary strategy assumes they'll have solid footing and the ability to use their mass and strength as weapons. Remove those advantages, and even the perfect predator becomes manageable. He walked closer to the suspended creature, which continued to thrash ineffectively in the magnetic field. The metallic content in its scales makes it an excellent conductor for bioelectrical systems, but that same adaptation makes it vulnerable to strong electromagnetic fields. It's not hurt, just contained. The Drake's struggles were slowing as it began to understand that its situation had fundamentally changed. The intelligent yellow eyes tracked Marcus's movement with what might have been recognition that this small creature was somehow responsible for its predicament. "How did you know?" Veltar asked, his voice filled with awe. "How did you know this would work?" Quote. Marcus smiled as he continued fine-tuning the magnetic field. "I didn't know for certain, but I knew that every problem has multiple solutions if you're willing to think beyond conventional approaches. Everyone else was thinking about how to fight this creature using strength and weapons. I thought about how to change the rules of engagement entirely." Zarathek approached slowly, her eyes never leaving the suspended Drake. "In all my years as a warrior, in all the legends of my people, I have never seen anything like this. A human, controlling a Nexus Drake without weapons, without strength, without Without violence, Marcus finished. Sometimes, the most elegant solutions don't require force at all. The crowd of workers began moving closer, their fear replaced by wonder and curiosity. Here was one of the galaxy's apex predators, reduced to helplessness by human ingenuity and the clever application of construction equipment. It was a sight that none of them would ever forget. Marcus activated his radio and called the site's security office. "This is Chen. I need a wildlife containment team and proper transport for a Nexus Drake. The situation is under control, but we need proper facilities for relocation." "Did you say the situation is under control?" came the incredulous reply from security. "Affirmative. The creature is secured and poses no immediate threat." Behind him, Zarathek continued to stare at the suspended Drake, her mind struggling to process what she had witnessed. Everything she had been taught about strength and power, everything her culture valued about warrior prowess, had just been rendered irrelevant by a human with an engineering degree and construction equipment. "How long can you hold it like this?" she asked. Marcus checked his power readings. "As long as necessary. The magnetic field is stable, and the site generators have plenty of capacity. The Drake isn't being harmed. It's probably safer suspended here than it would be in most transport containers." As if understanding their conversation, the Nexus Drake stopped struggling and hung quietly in the magnetic field. Its intelligent eyes continued to track Marcus's movements, but the earlier aggression had been replaced by what looked almost like curiosity. "It's learning," observed Thyro, the Coraxian supervisor. "Nexus Drakes are highly intelligent. This one is trying to understand what happened to it." Marcus nodded, still monitoring the magnetic field strength on his tablet. Intelligence is another survival trait. This creature knows when to fight and when to adapt. Right now, it's adapting. The implications of what had just occurred were beginning to sink in among the assembled workers. A human, physically the weakest species represented on the construction site, had just accomplished something that would have challenged their strongest warriors. And he had done it without violence, without weapons, without even raising his voice. "The transport team is en route," Marcus announced. "ETA 15 minutes. We'll transfer the Drake to a proper wildlife sanctuary on the inner continent. The shipping company will face charges for illegal transport of dangerous fauna." Zarathek stepped closer to Marcus, her towering form casting him in shadow. But for the first time since he had known her, there was no contempt in her golden eyes. Instead, there was something that looked almost like respect. "Human," she said formally, "I owe you an apology." The construction site went quiet again. A draconian warrior offering an apology was unprecedented, especially to a member of what they considered a lesser species. Marcus looked up at her, seeing the struggle playing out behind her eyes as pride warred with honesty. "No apology necessary," Marcus replied simply. "Different species, different strengths. We all contribute in our own ways." But Zarathek shook her massive head. "No, human. What I witnessed here, this was not simply contributing in your own way. This was mastery. This was..." She struggled for words that could adequately describe what she had seen. "This was proof that strength comes in forms my people never considered." The suspended Nexus Drake chose that moment to let out a soft rumble, almost conversational in tone. It was looking directly at Marcus, its head tilted in an unmistakably curious gesture. "I think it likes you," Veltar observed with amazement. Marcus couldn't help but smile. "Respect is universal, regardless of species. Show intelligence and consideration, and even predators can recognize it." As the sound of approaching transport vehicles grew louder, the word of what had happened began spreading beyond the immediate construction site. What had started as a potential disaster was about to become the kind of story that traveled across the galaxy, changing perceptions and challenging assumptions wherever it was told. But that was still to come. For now, Marcus Chen stood calmly beneath a floating Nexus Drake, proving to anyone who cared to look that human strength came in forms that couldn't be measured by traditional standards. The transport team arrived exactly on schedule, their specialized vehicle equipped with containment fields designed for dangerous wildlife. But when they stepped out of their transport, the wildlife containment specialists stopped dead in their tracks. The sight of a Nexus Drake hanging peacefully in midair, suspended by construction electromagnets, was not what they had expected to find. "Control, this is Transport Team 7. The team leader spoke into his communicator, his voice tight with disbelief. "Can you confirm the situation report? Because what I'm looking at here doesn't match any of our standard protocols." Marcus approached the transport team, tablet still in hand. "The creature is secure and docile. We'll need to coordinate the transfer carefully to avoid any sudden movements that might agitate it." The team leader, a grizzled Coraxian veteran named Crix, looked from Marcus to the suspended Drake and back again. "Sir, with all respect, our protocols are very specific about Nexus Drake containment. These creatures require military-grade restraints and combat-trained handlers. This doesn't make sense. Sometimes the best solutions don't follow standard protocols," Marcus replied. "The creature isn't agitated because it isn't being treated as an enemy. It's intelligent enough to recognize when it's being helped, rather than threatened." Zarathek stepped forward, her massive frame towering over the transport team. "I witnessed the entire event," she announced, her voice carrying the formal authority of a draconian warrior. "The human accomplished what none of our strongest could have achieved. He controlled the beast without violence, without weapons, with nothing but knowledge and courage." The transport team exchanged glances. A draconian offering testimony about human capability was unusual enough to get their attention. But Zarathek wasn't finished. "Furthermore," she continued, "I formally retract every disparaging comment I have made about human weakness. What I witnessed here has shown me that my understanding of strength was incomplete." A murmur ran through the assembled workers. Word was spreading rapidly across the construction site and beyond. Carried by personal communicators and work radios, the story was growing with each telling, but the core facts remained unchanged. A human foreman had single-handedly contained one of the galaxy's most dangerous predators, using nothing but standard construction equipment. Marcus carefully transferred control of the magnetic field to the transport team's specialized containment systems. The Nexus Drake remained calm throughout the process, its intelligent eyes tracking the activity around it, with what seemed like understanding rather than aggression. "It's remarkable," observed Dr. Yenth, the containment team's xenobiologist. "Nexus Drakes typically exhibit extreme stress responses during capture and transport. This specimen shows no signs of trauma or agitation. Its biochemical readings are actually within normal parameters for a resting state. That's because it was never really captured," Marcus explained as they completed the transfer. From the Drake's perspective, the situation changed from trapped and desperate to safely controlled. There was no fight or flight response, because there was no perceived threat. The transport team secured the Drake in their specialized containment unit, where it settled down as if preparing for a routine journey. Through the transparent walls of its temporary habitat, the creature's yellow eyes remained fixed on Marcus until the very moment the transport vehicle departed for the wildlife sanctuary. As the transport disappeared into the distance, the construction site gradually returned to normal activity. But the atmosphere had fundamentally changed. Workers who had witnessed the event looked at Marcus with new respect, while those who had only heard the story approached him with questions and curiosity. "Foreman Chen," called out Veltar, the Aquarian engineer, "I've been thinking about your solution. The magnetic field strength required to lift a Nexus Drake should have been enormous. How did you calculate the proper field intensity without knowing the creature's exact mass and metallic content?" Marcus smiled as he reviewed the day's work schedule on his tablet. "I didn't calculate it precisely. I started with enough field strength to lift our heaviest construction materials, and adjusted from there. Sometimes approximate solutions work better than exact calculations, especially when you're dealing with unknown variables." "But what if you had been wrong?" asked Thyro. "What if the magnetic field hadn't been strong enough? Or if the Drake had no metallic content in its scales? Then I would have tried something else," Marcus replied simply. "The magnetic field was my first option, not my only option. There were backup plans if that hadn't worked." Zarathek, who had been listening silently, stepped closer. "What were your backup plans, human?" Marcus looked up at the towering draconian warrior. "The construction site has sonic equipment for breaking up concrete, refrigeration units for cooling materials, and high-pressure water systems for cleaning. Any of those could have been adapted to contain or redirect a confused animal. The key is thinking about the problem from angles that the target doesn't expect. You had multiple contingency plans, Zarathek said slowly, as if testing the concept. You were prepared to adapt your strategy based on the creature's responses. That's basic project management, Marcus replied. You always plan for variables and unexpected complications. The same principles that work for construction projects work for problem-solving in general. The conversation was interrupted by the arrival of several official-looking vehicles. Representatives from the Galactic Construction Authority, the planetary government, and the Interspecies Safety Commission stepped out, their expressions ranging from skeptical to amazed. Director Hanesh of the Construction Authority, a tall Centaurian with multiple arms designed for multitasking, approached Marcus directly. Foreman Chen, we've received some extraordinary reports about today's events. Would you be willing to provide a formal statement? Of course, Marcus replied, though I should point out that the incident was resolved with minimal disruption to the construction schedule. We'll still meet our completion deadlines. Director Hanesh's multiple arms gestured in the Centaurian equivalent of surprised laughter. Foreman, the completion schedule is the least of our concerns right now. What you accomplished here today will require a complete revision of our dangerous wildlife protocols. More importantly, it may require a revision of our assessments regarding human capabilities in crisis situations. The formal interview took nearly 2 hours, with representatives from multiple agencies asking detailed questions about Marcus's decision-making process, his use of construction equipment, and his interaction with the Nexus Drake. Throughout the questioning, Marcus remained calm and matter-of-fact, treating the incident as if it were a routine problem solved through standard engineering principles. The most significant aspect, noted Commissioner Zelt of the Safety Commission, is that the solution was achieved without violence or the risk of injury to any personnel. Traditional containment protocols for Nexus Drakes typically involve armed response teams and significant risk of casualties. Violence should always be the last resort, Marcus replied. In this case, it wasn't necessary because the problem wasn't really about the creature being dangerous. The problem was about the creature being confused and trapped. Address the real problem, and the danger often resolves itself. As the official interviews concluded, word of the incident was already spreading beyond the construction site and the planet itself. Galactic news networks picked up the story, and within hours, footage of a human calmly controlling a Nexus Drake was being broadcast across known space. The reaction was immediate and overwhelming. Species that had considered humans useful but ultimately weak were forced to reconsider their assumptions. Military academies began analyzing Marcus's approach for lessons that could be applied to their own training. Engineering schools added the incident to their curriculum as an example of creative problem-solving under pressure. But perhaps the most significant response came from the Draconian High Command. In an unprecedented move, they formally acknowledged that their previous assessments of human capability had been incomplete and potentially counterproductive to interspecies cooperation. Zarathek received orders to remain on Kepler 442b and observe human work methods for potential integration into Draconian training programs. The proud warrior who had mocked human weakness was now tasked with learning from human ingenuity. I do not understand how your mind works, she admitted to Marcus as they reviewed construction plans the following morning. My people think in terms of force and conquest. You think in terms of... what would you call it? Marcus considered the question as he checked structural calculations on his tablet. Systems thinking, maybe. Every problem exists within a larger system of relationships and variables. Change the system, and you change the problem. Sometimes solving the larger system is easier than attacking the immediate problem directly. Show me, Zarathek said suddenly. Teach me to think like a human engineer. Marcus looked up at her, surprised by the request. Are you sure? It's not about becoming less of a warrior. It's about becoming a warrior who thinks in 3 dimensions instead of 1. Then teach me to think in 3 dimensions. Over the following weeks, as construction on the orbital platform continued, Marcus found himself with an unlikely apprentice. Zarathek proved to be a quick learner, her warrior's discipline translating surprisingly well to engineering principles. More importantly, she began teaching Marcus about Draconian tactical thinking, creating a knowledge exchange that benefited both of them. The story of the human Foreman and the Nexus Drake became legend throughout the galaxy. But for Marcus Chen, it remained simply another problem solved, another project completed successfully. The fact that he had changed galactic perceptions of humanity in the process was just a pleasant side effect. As he often told the reporters and academics who came to interview him, humans don't succeed because we're the strongest or the fastest. We succeed because we're willing to ask different questions and try unexpected solutions. In a universe full of species who think they know the only way to solve problems, sometimes the biggest advantage is being the one who thinks differently. The orbital defense platform was completed ahead of schedule and under budget. It stood as a testament not just to interspecies cooperation, but to the power of human ingenuity when applied with confidence and creativity. And in the facility's main corridor, a holographic display showed footage of a human Foreman calmly lifting a Nexus Drake into the air, proving to anyone who visited that strength came in many forms. The galaxy had learned an important lesson about humanity that day. But more importantly, humanity had learned something about itself. Sometimes the greatest strength isn't in how much you can lift, but in knowing exactly where to apply the leverage to move the entire universe.